Let me just say briefly where we're at. I think we're 3 steps from war with Russia, first time ever. There's talk of moving NATO troops to the Polish West Ukrainian border. If so, Putin will almost certainly send 100,000 troops into South and East Ukraine. He's only in Crimea now. That's the Cuban Missile Crisis, only worse. And then the next step, let's don't even talk about it.
The United States position on that referendum, I must say, is clear, and it's clear today. We believe the referendum is contrary to the Constitution of Ukraine, is contrary to international law, is in violation of that law, and we believe it is illegitimate. And as the President put it, illegal under the Ukrainian Constitution. Neither we nor the international community will recognize the results of this referendum. And we also remain deeply concerned about the large deployments of Russian forces in Crimea and along the eastern border with Russia, as well as the continuing provocations and some of the hooliganism of young people who have been attracted to cross the border and come into the east, as well as some of those who've lived there. I was clear with Foreign Minister Lavrov that the President has made it clear there will be consequences if Russia does not find a way to change course. And we don't say that as a threat. We say that as a direct consequence of the choices that Russia may or may not choose to make here. If Russia does establish facts on the ground that increase tensions or that threaten the Ukrainian people, then obviously that will beg an even greater response, and there will be costs.
Russia's actions are a problem. They don't pose the #1 national security threat to the United States. I continue to be much more concerned when it comes to our security with the prospect of a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan, which is part of the reason why the United States, showing its continued international leadership, has organized a forum over the last several years that's been able to help eliminate that threat in a consistent way.
The markets are not trembling, but are certainly sensitive to developments now that tensions have risen in the region over the Ukrainian crisis and the confiscation, the invasion and confiscation of Crimea. One wonders how much more world economies, world markets can take if the United States and Russia continue to escalate their focus and their threats and explore publicly the possibilities of what may be. And I'm referring specifically today to the Secretary of State General talking about things can get very ugly very quickly.
Very quickly on Ukraine, it can get ugly fast if the wrong choices are made. And it can get ugly in multiple directions. So our hope is that indeed there is a way to have a reasonable outcome here.
But Russia cannot escape the fact that the world is changing and rejecting outright their behavior. There are costs and growing costs that come with naked aggression.
Now, in regard to any sanctions, Mr. Lavrov delivered this probably, I think it would be fair to characterize it as a devastating blow to the United States' hopes when he said that U.S. sanctions against Moscow would hit the United States like a boomerang. House Speaker John Boehner weighed in on the crisis today with his own suggestion, a plan that he believes would effectively dull a lot of leverage that Putin has. In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this morning, Mr. Boehner said, and I'm quoting here, "The ability to turn the tables and put the Russian leader in check lies right beneath our feet in the form of vast supplies of natural energy."
In another major story breaking tonight, President Obama has slapped Russia with new sanctions. They are meant to punish President Vladimir Putin's inner circle after Russia took Crimea away from Ukraine. The Russians responded quickly with their own sanctions, banning several Americans, including Senator John McCain, House Speaker John Boehner, and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid from entering Russia. The bigger concern is, what will Putin do next? Will he try to grab more of Ukraine?
Scott, the buildup of Russian troops along the Ukrainian border is large and getting larger and is raising serious concerns Russia could invade Ukraine proper. Right now, there are as many as 20,000 Russian troops, complete with tanks and artillery, positioned just to the east of Ukraine. But other units deeper inside Russia appear to be on the move and could soon double the number of troops at the border. Today, Defense Secretary Hagel called Moscow to ask Russia's defense minister directly about the troop movements. According to Pentagon spokesman Admiral John Kirby, the Russian promised there would be no invasion.
It's an exercise only. No intention of crossing the border into Ukraine. Not going to take any aggressive action. That was Minister Shoigu's words, and Secretary Hagel's expectation is that he'll live up to those words.
The obvious next question is, how long will the exercise last? But when Hagel asked the Russian defense minister, the answer was, there is no firm timetable.
David, thanks.
Good morning, Bill.
Is Crimea lost already?
Yes, it's gone. And, I mean, Vladimir Putin does not have a reverse gear. And if you look at his history in office, since his prime minister days in the late 90s, he has never backed down on a single issue. He's always gotten his way. And so now, unless that Putin hits a wall, he's not going to stop. No, but the sanctions, to make them bite, to make them count, they've got to be international and truly hard-hitting and unified.
Well, there's definitely, this has been so far a tactical victory for Vladimir Putin, but it could be a strategic setback for him in the long term. If, and here's the big if, Eric, if the West, if the United States and its European allies manage to impose sanctions that really bite, and that's the difficult part because Europe is so dependent on Russia for oil and gas.
Germany is the #1 market for Moscow
exactly.
gas, for example. Do you think that these sanctions that will likely be announced tomorrow will be enough?
Well, if they get what they're planning to do, it could really hurt. In fact, the former finance minister of Russia, who's very respected, Alexei Kudrin, said that it could cost Russia $50 billion a quarter in lost foreign investment, and that we might wind up with a year of no growth if, in fact, the sanctions that are now being discussed are put into play.
Do you think Putin's willing to lose, what, $200 billion a year, or is that for them a drop in the bucket?
No, it's not, depending on the price of gas and the price of oil. The problem for the Obama administration and its allies is that all of us are democracies, and we're very price sensitive in terms of ballot boxes. If the price of oil shoots up in Germany, Angela Merkel, who is really key to this and key to imposing sanctions, may get wobbly at the knees. We just don't know how strong and for how long the United States can insist on sanctions.
Well, I think economic sanctions are a very important step. Identify these kleptocrats and look, Russia is a gas station masquerading as a country. It's kleptocracy, it's corruption, it's a nation that is really only dependent upon oil and gas for their economy.
So what is Russia's real stronghold over Europe? And why are there growing fears Russia could hold all of Europe hostage in the Ukraine crisis? Well, it turns out Russia controls a major share of Europe's energy market, including all of these gas pipelines highlighted in blue that run directly through Ukraine. Jonathan Hunt here now with more on the growing concerns. So, Jonathan, energy is the key reason why Europe might not be able to back the U.S. sanctions, right?
Yeah, fear and self-interest are two of the driving forces here, Gretchen. Europe has now become so dependent on energy sources from Russia that they are terrified of instigating any sort of sanctions regime against the Russians. Take a look at these figures on the natural gas supply to Europe. The Czech Republic, for instance, gets 100% of the natural gas it consumes from Russia. Greece, 70%. Ukraine itself, 60%. And Germany, 50%. Now, we investigated this huge Russian natural gas company, Gazprom, 8 years ago, and we were told then that Vladimir Putin, who was then president of Russia as well, as you remember, was using this as part of his foreign policy. Listen here.
It is a significant, serious tool of Russian statecraft that is dangerous for Europe. It's absolutely devastating for Ukraine, and certainly not good for Russian democracy, Russian freedom, or for the United States.
And just to emphasize again, that interview took place in 2006. All those predictions, Gretchen, now coming true, it seems.
Wow. So Germany is really key, though, as to how the rest of Europe reacts. Why?
Yeah, Germany is literally the big dog in Europe. If Germany wants sanctions against Russia, they would happen. If Germany doesn't want sanctions, they won't happen. And Germany, more than any other Western European nation, has tied itself to Russian energy. It was a policy first instigated by then-Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder. You see him here alongside President Vladimir Putin almost a decade ago. It was controversial then, and we traveled to Germany to ask him about it. He did not want to answer our questions. Listen here. Mr. Schroeder, could we talk to you about the pipeline project? Is there a conflict of interest in you being involved, sir? Mr. Schroeder, have you sold out your country? Sold out his country to that man, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, in the eyes of many Germans. And as I say, Gretchen, if Germany does not want to act with any sort of force against Russia, then the rest of Europe likely to fall in line with Germany because they control the European economy right now.
Wow. Amazing report. Jonathan, thanks so much.
Obama is trying to rally international support for efforts to isolate Russia over its incursion into Ukraine. The president made his latest pitch at the beginning of a big week of international diplomacy. Our chief White House correspondent Ed Henry is traveling with the president in the Netherlands tonight.
Russian troops today seized the last land base in Crimea, leading the acting president of Ukraine to redeploy all of his military units, soldiers literally picking up their bags and getting out.
The National Security and Defense Council has also instructed the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine to evacuate families of servicemen whose life and health are under real threat.
That threat has only been building since the annexation of Crimea by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who decided to skip the nuclear security summit here at The Hague that's a pet project of President Obama and kicked off with a dramatic light show. Putin sent his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, who proclaimed his nation is not bothered that the president and key European allies are going to avoid the G8 summit the Russians were planning to host this June. Mr. Obama today convened a G7 meeting on the sidelines of this nuclear summit and made the case the second round of U.S. sanctions is taking a toll on Russia's economy.
We're united in imposing a cost on Russia for its actions so far.
Except the European allies are not united on a new round of sanctions out of a fear that hitting Russia may boomerang on their own still recovering economies, which is why the G7 put out a strongly worded statement declaring Russia has violated international law but took no new action. While just 1,600 miles from the Netherlands, the Russians continue to mass a large number of troops on Ukraine's border, as Crimea was officially recognized as part of Russia by Afghan President Hamid Karzai. In a meeting with Lavrov today, Secretary of State John Kerry said he's received disturbing reports that many Ukrainian service members have gone missing, and Ukraine's foreign minister warned the chances of a full-scale war,
they are growing. We don't know what Putin has in his mind and what would be his decision. That's why the situation becoming even more explosive.
Yet the president insisted today in an interview with a Dutch newspaper that Russia could still be helpful on other U.S. diplomatic initiatives, saying, quote, on Iran, the United States and other P5+1 countries, including Russia, are united in our goal of preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Republicans like Mitt Romney, who was mocked by the president for saying Russia was America's top geopolitical foe, are deeply skeptical.
Well, but there's no question but that the president's naivete with regards to Russia and his faulty judgment about Russia's intentions and objectives has led to a number of foreign policy challenges that we face.
So the G7 formally suspended Russia from the G8. Putin is out, but top U.S. officials admit here that the Russian troops may take more territory in Ukraine anyway. John.
Ed Henry reporting live for us tonight from The Hague. Ed, thanks so much.